Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The Honourable Prime Minister, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Honourable Cabinet Ministers, Honourable Members of Parliament, I rise before this August House to give a brief update on the status of COVID-19 in Fiji. Honourable Speaker, Fiji's 7-day rolling average as of yesterday, Sunday the 15th of August, is 7.0 daily deaths with a case fatality rate of 0.9%. We have had widespread community transmission in the Central Division with a test positivity of over 30%. And we are also beginning to see a rise in the Western Division, which continues to record increasing number of cases every day. Current statistics from the Western Division indicate increasing hospital admission, the ICU admission, as compared to the previous 2 weeks. Honourable Speaker, sir, I continue to meet with my officials every day to discuss the progress in our national pandemic response, deliberate on what activities the data is telling us, and we listen to our infectious disease and pandemic response experts, including those from WHO and Australia-New Zealand MET, our medical assistance team. And we also visit our teams at the front line and get on-the-ground perspectives. And we formulate appropriate advice and recommendation for the government to consider. Honourable Speaker, the WHO and ANZ MET experts are not only providing virtual daily advice, but in addition, they have physical presence in mentoring, guiding, evaluating the work on the ground. Many of the recommendations have been implemented, and certainly their high-level expertise and advice is always welcomed. In addition, we have interest for other teams to come over, an American team, a New Zealand-based PACMED team, and a Rubicon team. These teams are already in consultations and are talking to my permanent secretary and our group of experts as they maneuver through this response. Honourable Speaker, we also have a permanent secretaries group that runs a detailed, comprehensive profiling and even door-to-door profiling. There's evaluation, they provide counselling, data analysis, and this is sent back to the incident management team. In addition, there is a vaccination mobile team that's value-added to this team. And when we find there are people in the community that haven't been vaccinated, the team actually provides counseling, and the mobile vaccination team goes forward and actually provides the vaccination on the ground in their own homes, so that to make sure that they are not left behind. Honourable Speaker, our medical experts nevertheless have support from their many colleagues overseas, as most of them have spent periods of time post-training and their clinical disciplines at virtual sessions that they are part of, and best practices shared. I've been part of several of these sessions, and some of our policy in managing COVID pregnant women and vaccinations in pregnant women have been shared from obstetricians from the global organizations to their local obstetrician counterparts in Fiji. In addition, the high-level meetings organized by WHO and other UN agencies at ministerial or permanent secretary level are where we share our challenges, just like the other countries do, and then they continue to provide the high-level policy advice. In response to changes in the outbreak and the ongoing community transmission in the Central and Western Division, we have in the past 2 weeks re-strategized our COVID-19 testing strategy to address the significant pressure on our laboratories and health services during the mitigation phase response. The mitigation response is a recognized public health intervention in an outbreak, and we've utilized the framework of this in the past, as when we had a significant dengue fever outbreak in 2013-2014 with 15,000 cases. There's literature available, including WHO and CDC, and every country or region is advised to understand the in-depth case profiles, the cultural and socio-economic landscape, their health system ability, and to respond and chart their pathway based on these principles. This includes being more targeted with the testing, so we can provide turnaround results quicker to the most at risk of severe COVID-19. It is critical that we are using our various service data and disease outbreak indicators to inform our understanding of the current situation in these divisions. Honourable Speaker, our disease surveillance teams are rapidly analyzing various data sources to help us build a clearer picture of the current transmission in these divisions. However, we do know that the risk of exposure to the virus in both Central and Western divisions remains high, with significant community transmission of the highly transmissible Delta variant. On a brighter note, we continue to record recoveries every day from the diseases. Another 231 recoveries were recorded in the last 24 hours ending yesterday morning, bringing our total number of recoveries to 15,841. And some of these individuals have returned home to their families, while those who are on home isolation are now able to leave the comfort of their homes to go and work or to go and to the supermarket. Honorable Speaker, on Saturday, 14th of August, 2021, last Saturday, we had our first case in the north, outside of quarantine. This was a frontline officer at the No. 1 port who deals with the clearing of cargo. Ships at the port and our Boa Northern team have acted quickly to put in place the necessary public health measures such as contact tracing, testing and isolation with the objective to contain and eliminate the disease in the Northern Division. Honorable Speaker, prior to this, while the disease was limited to Viti Levu, our northern as well as our maritime areas, divisional health teams with the support of the divisional commissioners and all government agencies have been in preparation phase with ongoing screening, disease surveillance within the community as well as in the ports of entry, while at the same time fine-tuning their response plans that cover for the main islands as well as the small island communities. Awareness campaigns have been carried out in their communities, and healthcare facilities in the Northern Division and also in the maritime areas have been made ready with the training of health staff similar to the training that we receive here on Viti Levu, using virtual platforms. And the frontline teams, the designation of COVID wards, isolation beds, and establishment of community isolation facilities with the support of the divisional commissioners. More importantly, the divisional teams have also embarked on vaccination, and to date the North has had 80% with the first dose coverage and 12% of the target population fully vaccinated with the second dose. When the positive case in Namboa was highlighted last Saturday, all these preparations were in place, and I would like to reassure our Northerners in Tobata that we are as prepared as we can, and we will need their support and adherence to public health safe measures and the vaccination program to stop the virus in its tracks. Globally, Honorable Speaker, there's been 207 million cases of COVID-19 with 4.4 million deaths. Cases continue to increase across the globe, and this is being driven by the variants, and in this case, at this moment, it is the Delta variant, which according to the Center for Disease Control, it causes between 80 to 87% of all US COVID-19 cases in the last 2 weeks. The variant's exceptional infectiousness has also driven cases in the US from a 7-day average of 13,000 2 weeks ago to 92,000 as of 3rd of August daily. I would like to quote the American Microbiology Society. They said, to a world that has become very weary, yet accustomed to playing defense against SARS-CoV-2, the evolution of the Delta variant is both unwelcome and unsurprising. The Delta variant was first identified in India in December 2020. Within months, it has spread to over 100 countries around the world, including ours, United States, India, United Kingdom, and Israel. While the US has had 50% fully vaccinated coverage, the Delta variant is now, as I've alluded to earlier, responsible for more than 80% of COVID-19 reported cases. The Delta variant is up to 60% more transmissible. Furthermore, significant viral particles have been found in airways of those affected with the Delta variant as opposed to the other variants. According to a UK report, the symptoms can be varied. Apart from fever, they can also have headache, sore throat, runny nose are more common, while cough and loss of smell are also less so. There's situations where inability to have adequate oxygen within the system also being manifested in those who have the Delta variant of the disease. Research is ongoing to determine if the Delta variant infection is associated with increased hospitalization and death, but one early study assessing the risk of hospital admission in Scotland reported that hospitalization is twice as likely in the unvaccinated individuals with Delta as in unvaccinated individuals with Alpha. Honorable Speaker, still it is difficult to determine whether Delta is actually making people more sicker than previous forms of the virus, or if it is simply circulating amongst more vulnerable populations where case numbers are high. Vaccination rates are low in these areas, and I continue to stress again today the importance of being fully vaccinated. Honorable Speaker, over the past few months, we've seen a spike in dangerous misinformation and individuals posing as experts, providing incorrect facts about COVID-19 disease and the COVID-19 vaccine. We are concerned that people are inclined to resist the vaccine and will cling to this misinformation or even misconstrue facts that are reported correctly, threatening the efforts of our teams. So I want to state and restate the facts about the current situation of the Delta variant, as I've alluded to. Research to date have also revealed that the Delta variant is even more transmissible than the common flu or influenza virus. Here in Fiji, the evidence is showing that we are on the right track in responding to this new strain. The latest global data tells us that the vaccine does reduce the risk of symptomatic disease from the virus, and also in the Public Health England report, up to 90% chance of protection against hospitalization and death. And while some people may be infected with the virus, when fully vaccinated, COVID-19 vaccines are highly effective in reducing a person's risk of becoming seriously ill. Honorable Speaker, the experience from these countries and the latest guidance from global experts provide us a picture of what we in Fiji can anticipate for the future. If we reach our goal of at least 80% fully vaccinated for our target population, while we may still see people getting infected with the virus, we will not see nearly as many people become seriously ill or dying or being hospitalized. Our ultimate goal is to protect our family, our friends, and colleagues from becoming seriously ill or dying from this virus, and the vaccines are the best way out. Honorable Speaker, we should all be vaccinated, not only for our health, but the health of those all around us, our families, friends, co-workers, and customers. We also know that vaccination alone is not the answer. We must continue to apply all the public health measures such as wearing masks, frequent washing, physical distancing, practicing the correct cough and sneeze etiquette until we reach our full vaccination targets. These COVID-safe measures are essential and compulsory. For those in the community who are yet to be vaccinated, I want to again remind you to listen to the facts and not be misguided by the misinformation. Mr. Speaker, there have been people talking erroneously, including an unregistered doctor, and analyzing evidence erroneously, and using mainstream media, and also being part of a panel discussion. Sir, this is a matter of life and death. We must not give erroneous analysis a platform to discourage our people in seeking health and life. For the vaccination is free. Admission hospitalization is free. The intervention presented to our people, if adhered to, is life-saving. Honorable Speaker, the Minister of Health and Medical Services have reviewed a recommended 90 days waiting period for a person previously infected with COVID-19 in getting vaccination. Based on recent evidence and advice from WHO Strategic Advisory Group of experts based on immunization, all those who have recovered from COVID-19 or presumed COVID-19 are eligible for vaccination once they have completed 14 days of isolation and have recovered from the acute illness. The evidence is that the vaccine is safe for people with prior COVID-19 infection, including within 19 days of recent recovery. Furthermore, while there is evidence that previous infection confers immunity for at least 6 months, immunity from previous infection will have limited protection from other variants of concern. This is why people who have been previously infected with COVID-19 need to be vaccinated. We are also aware that previous advice was partly promoted when vaccine supply was limited to ensure priority is given to those without any form of immunity. Given the high level of vaccine supply available with us, the prevailing vaccine safety data, the need for broader protection of the population, and the highly transmissible nature of the Delta variant, we are advising all Fijians that have had recovered recently from COVID-19 or presumed COVID-19 are eligible for vaccination once they've completed 14 days of isolation and recovered from acute illness. The stance is also consistent with current global best practice and WHO advice. In the early days of our COVID-19 containment effort, the Ministry made it clear that all Fijians that our effort is based specifically on 2 broad strategies. Our primary public health interventions, we focus on prevention of an outbreak and the protection of everyone. We had activated our quarantine facilities and designated isolation facilities to ensure that. We had mandatory curfew hours, including consecutive lockdowns to contain the virus and help stop infection. We set up both mobile and stationary screening teams and tents to test as widely as possible to make sure that we pick up any community case. We set up contact tracing teams to ensure that positive cases get followed up with primary and secondary contacts isolated. In that process, however, we had clearly indicated to everyone that should our cases surge to unmanageable level, we will change strategy to mitigation phase, which I've alluded to earlier is a non-public health intervention, which focuses on clinical care pathways and the management of the sick and saving lives. We've changed strategy in both Central and Western Division to mitigation phase in the last few weeks, and testing in this mitigation phase is still a priority, and our mobile screening teams had a cumulative number of those screened at 790,403 up to yesterday, with an accumulated 69,891 of those swabbed before the mitigation phase. Our stationary clinics continue to do screening, up to 3,000 individuals screened over the last 24 hours as to yesterday in the evening. However, because of the wide community transmission in both the Central and West, we have set up designated swabbing facilities to ensure that the criteria is closely followed with maximum outcome. We continue to test. We continue to screen. Our national test positivity rate on a 7-day moving average is 33.3%, with a daily around about 2% per 1,000 population as of yesterday. Since entering into our mitigation phase, contact tracing teams have now been called the monitoring teams, and thus tracing virtually through phone calls, but mainly to establish the risk level of both the patient and their contacts. That risk level is based specifically on whether the patient or any of their contacts have had any pre-existing medical conditions which makes them vulnerable or developing severe conditions should they get sick. And this strategy, sir, was done in consultation with our experts from WHO who've had previous experience in this. One of them has had previous experience with even working with the Ebola virus in West Africa. Honorable Speaker, I outlined in my budget response the various mental health support available to all Fijians, including our frontline workers. We have developed support groups, Viber groups, buddy systems for our frontliners, including the creation of Tanano sessions or distress platforms to allow them to unwind and share their stories. We've also collaborated with Empower Pacific through Australian Aid for the 5626 helpline and the Mental Health 165 helpline. We have recruited in-house counselor for frontline workers, including a short-term COVID-19 psychosocial support consultant, and the setting up of regional forums, webinars for frontline workers to share their experience and learnings to the region and from the region. Honorable Speaker, at this time I want to thank and acknowledge the immense support from our multilateral partners, supporters, well-wishers and friends in our fight against COVID-19. Some of the support came in terms of vaccines, PPE, medical supplies, equipment, testing machine, consumables, beds, mattresses, pillows, disinfectants, ambulances, food rations, oxygen concentrators, funding, technical support, and technical advice. I thank the government, the people of Australia, New Zealand, India, China, USA, Japan, Austria, Korea, the European Union, UN agencies, COVAX facilities, the World Bank, SPC, Asian Development Bank, NZMAC, WHO, the local corporate bodies, local NGOs and CSOs, faith-based organizations, social and community groups, generous families and individuals. Sir, they are all part of our response. Sir, never in the field of human conflict was much owed by so many to few. This was Sir Winston Churchill speaking to the British Parliament and referring to the RAF pilots and crew as they defended England from the invasion of Nazi Germany. These words echo true today as our beloved country battles a fight and a war right now. Fiji's COVID outbreak response frontline teams are out there every day. The few and the many of us that depend on them doing their best to protect the lives of all Fijians from the threat of COVID-19. As they make their daily sacrifices, they often face constant barrage of insult and mockery from a minority, even of their own people, healthcare workers, not in the front line. Many of them do not realize that this is a battle with COVID-19. They don't believe that people are dying from the virus. They do not believe that vaccinations can help prevent them from dying. And Honorable Speaker, this misinformation, disinformation, even members of this August House were part of it. As a nation, we must embrace the public health safe measures. If you're in Viti Levu, as soon as you leave the comfort of your home, put on your mask. We must not gather. And if needed to do for a funeral, please adhere to the 10. We must maintain our physical distance, wash hands regularly, and this will pass. Sir, if we embrace as swiftly as possible vaccination, and everyone has been vaccinated fully after being vaccinated with the initial dose. I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because I heard a concerning message from the medical officer in Nabosa this morning who say that after the first dose there were challenges again being able to roll out the second dose. We must encourage everyone to be vaccinated. And if they have been vaccinated once, they must come back for their second vaccination. Because it's after being vaccinated fully, the second dose, in 2 weeks after, then the greatest protection from immunity is available in the body. Sir, we are at war, just like Tropical Cyclone Winston, just as our boys did when they won the Olympic gold again, just as the Fijiana team did. We must play together and we must build a powerful spirit. The principles each time were the same. Together we can and together we will. We will continue to fight the good fight and shut down the naysayers, the anti-vaxxers, the opportunities who prey on the gullibility of people. And more importantly, we will fight and overcome this pandemic of COVID-19. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.